Aloha everyone, welcome back to Heartbeat Narratives. My name is Molly and I'm your host. It is a beautiful Aloha Friday and I'm sitting in Kapi'olani Park in the watershed of Waikiki and it is so stunning. And our guest today is Harry and we have a bunch of mutual friends. We reconnected today at lunch and I asked him to do an interview because he has a very fascinating job. So Harry, thank you so much for saying yes to coming on today. Very last minute, but I think you've got some stories that I think people will find very interesting. To kick it off, where are you from?
So I'm from White Bear Lake, Minnesota.
I know Minnesota really well.
Yeah.
I grew up not too far away from you in the suburbs of the Twin Cities. And I know you have a connection to Hawaii as well. So how did you end up coming out here?
Yeah, I came out here the first time for college. I had never been before, and when we were doing the college search thing that you do in high school, just somebody in my class kind of was like, oh, there is a college in Hawaii. Wouldn't that be funny if somebody went there? And that is what started my interest in coming here for college.
What else brought you to the University of Hawaii? I feel like you had a lot of different interests.
Yeah. I actually was a really big fan of the Hawaii diving team would post these YouTube videos every year. It was like the craziest cliff jumping videos you've ever seen would be the title. And I remember watching that and being like, dang, those guys look like they're having so much fun. I want to go to Hawaii. I want to make friends and do that stuff. And then all at once, when I got to the team, like it was those people there. So it was fun to see them in the early days of YouTube and then to go out and be like, oh, these are the people. And they actually are that fun in real life too.
They became your friends.
Yeah, totally.
So since your time in college, doing all the fun things, diving and being like very sports oriented, what have you been up to since that point and where are you living currently?
So currently I live in Zortman, Montana. It's about 3 hours north of Billings. And I work for the Bureau of Land Management as a wildland firefighter. I got into that after I was working an internship at the University of Minnesota as an academic advisor. I think it was 2021 that all the haze and wildfire smoke from Canada, Montana, and Idaho was blowing in and the city just got real socked in and hazy for a span of a couple days. And I think it's partly from my time in Hawaii, but just also in life, I've always felt nature was really cool and important. Going to the redwoods as a kid was a big memory for me. And then coming out here, Malama Aina, all the connection to the land, the responsibility. I had this moment sitting in my office looking out the window and just thought, we should be doing something about this. And then I had the thought of, oh, I'm somebody. I should also just go out and be doing something about this.
So that was your segue into becoming a wildland firefighter and being like hands-on, first responder.
Yeah, I had a friend who told me about the Conservation Corps, which is just like an entry level. A lot of kids do it between college years. They just do it over the summer for 3 months, and I got into that, realized that I really liked the forestry work. But then from there, just the next logical step was going to full-time fire.
What was training like?
Training, I started off on a chainsaw crew, so we would go out and do conservation efforts like rehabilitating overgrown tree stands, cutting out dead or standing dead trees, cleaning up after fires. And then from there, we went into a prescribed burn and chainsaw crew, where we would go out and we would burn either piles or really low complexity prescribed burning operations. So from that, we got our certificates for L180, S190, just the basics that you need to be qualified to work on an active fire.
I'm really curious because I don't know a lot about fires, but I know that here in Hawaii and in places that are drier, like the West Coast and even in the Midwest these days, fires are always a threat, and it's becoming more and more of a threat as climates heat up. What is it like being in an active fire, and what was your first time being in a fire like?
What I think of as the first kind of real fire that we're in was a prescribed burn that just had a lot more volatile activity than we were expecting. It was out in Montana, and the goal of a prescribed burn is to burn off a lot of that low level, kind of the regen, new trees that are growing up that would overcrowd an otherwise healthy stand, or burning off a lot of grass, anything on that ground level of a forest or area, just to reintroduce fire to a landscape, because it is a naturally occurring thing in areas that, now that we are under a full suppression sort of strategy for all fires, that's now missing from the landscape and causing a lot of overgrowing. So this fire prescribed burn that we were on, it just was a lot more volatile. It got up into the crown, the canopy of the tree.
Oh, wow.
And so once it's there, that's where fire is its most aggressive. It becomes wind driven. Those are like the big, like the Palisades fire. When it gets into the crown like that, and then of course it's dry and with a wind component, that really introduces a lot of oxygen and can make a fire go very large very quick. So I remember being on that and thinking like, this is kind of freaky. Like I've kind of got to toughen up if this is what all prescribed burns are like. But it's interesting as long as the overhead, the people in charge of you are keeping their calm. It feels very much like when you're a kid and it's scary to you and then you see mom and dad aren't scared. You instinctively just react the same way that the people in charge do.
Okay. So when the fires are that big and you're just like looking at this wall of like red and orange and yellow, how close are you standing to it? And are your colleagues, the other firefighters, like close to you, far away? How are you all positioned?
Yeah, so there's two main methods of containing and suppressing a large wildfire. Going indirect is going to be you're not near the flame at all, and that's going to be helicopter bucket drops. You might be cutting fuel breaks, so you might be a mile down, just clear cutting an area. Your goal is to remove any amount of fuel, just anything that can burn, from where the fire is to the next thing that could get to. So in a large city, you might use something like a road as a holding feature, and your goal is pretty much just to surround that fire, cut off any fuel that it can get. If it doesn't have food, just like anything else, it'll die down and consume what's internal. And if you're talking about a large scale operation, a lot of the time you're going indirect. On smaller fires or fires that are a little bit calmer activity, you will go direct, which is going to be usually digging in the ground with tools down to mineral soil. And you want to do that as close as you can to the fire's edge. So you're going to dig an 18-inch swath of land, and you're going to do that 2 to 3 inches from the fire. And when you're doing that, you're in a crew. It could be 3 people, it could be 20 people. It depends on the situation, just what's called for.
Okay. So when you're digging, is it to create like a break so that the fire doesn't continue burning consistently? There's like dirt in between where it's currently burning and where it could burn?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Fire, it needs 3 things to survive. It needs oxygen, fuel, and heat. It's this triangle that it needs to balance to keep going. And so our goal is to remove one of those elements. So we can't really do anything about oxygen. Fire's hot. So all that's left to do is just take out anything that can burn.
Okay. It sounds like you travel quite a bit with your work. Where have you been in the last couple years managing fires, and what stands out to you from the different places you've been?
So I'm currently working out of Montana, but we are federal, so we go all around the country. I've mainly been to the west, so Idaho, Washington, California, Arizona, as well as North Dakota. Utah's in there somewhere, actually.
Okay.
I think what's really interesting is when you go and see the different fuel components. So North Dakota and eastern Montana is going to be mainly grassland. They're usually low intensity fires, but they can go quick. It's not unheard of for a very small fire to go 5,000 acres in a couple hours, versus in Oregon, when you have those larger trees, it's a wetter area. Things that I see in Montana that would be a concern of, oh, that's something that's definitely the fire is going to take to, we need to mitigate that sort of as soon as possible. I've seen fire try to climb into trees in certain areas, and it just do absolutely nothing. So I think just the way that the fire interacts with different fuel types, wood types, atmospheres, humidity, anything to do with just winds, anything going on, the different ways that fire can react and the way that you have to adapt and learn to it, I think has been it's been honestly really cool, and it's just been really fun to try to figure it out.
When you were talking about what you do for work at lunch today, I immediately knew that I wanted to ask you if you'd be open to an interview. And so in every interview, I ask people, what makes your heart beat? What brings you joy? And so I'm going to ask you that. Does this job bring you joy? And if so, how?
I like that question. That's a good question. I think if I had to say what really makes my heart beat, it's probably people. I'm a really big fan of just, I don't know, other people that want to have fun, You get to hear their stories because everybody's got a different story, and a lot of people, I think, are just out here trying to have a good time. Like, you're a little kid at the park and you see another little kid at the park and you're like, we're best friends now. And I think fire is really a culture that a lot of people that kept that into adulthood also still have, because it's an out there job. And then the job itself really lends to creating like deep personal bonds with other people, because you might be out with the same 20 people every day for 16 hours a day. And then after that, you're all in the same little area together for up to 21 days at a time. And so then you work that closely and that intimately with people in very stressful situations, and then sometimes very boring and calm situations. It's really awesome to see how you can work together with so many different types of people in so many different types of ways. The conservation and the helping the environment is a huge drive for me as well. But anytime that we're out there, like a bad day, a good day is really made by the people that are out there too. You can work yourself ragged 5 days in a row, and as long as you got the right people with you, it's a pretty easy job. So I work for 6 months a year, and then I live in a van for the other parts of it, and then I usually, right now I'm out here seeing these friends, and yeah, when I'm back on the mainland, driving around seeing other friends.
Yeah. Do you feel like this job ties in with your athletics, your athletic background?
Yeah, definitely. It's a job, it's a very physical job, and I think if you were going to play one football game, you could probably get through that one game without injury. I think a big part of this job that we all take very seriously when we're not actively on fires is just our nutrition, making sure that our bodies are healthy, making sure that once we're getting into unideal conditions, that we have a body that can hold up in a way that it'll continue to perform. The Bureau of Land Management is really good about taking care of people. So if somebody were to get hurt on the line, we always say it's our number one resource is the people working. And so it can be very quick, I should say, to get people out, and they do a really good job taking care of people when they are injured. But it's obviously something you want to avoid. And so it feels like you definitely are back in sports with having a competitive season where you're on the fire line, you're active, you're wearing yourself down, and then in the off season, you get to take a few months off, recuperate, and then get back into that prep for the next season coming up.
Could you walk me through a typical day of like your nutrition, your working out, your training, and then say the next day there is a fire, and how would you prep and then go into that?
One thing that I like is it's pretty regimented, your day to day. So we just work a normal 8-hour day if there's not a fire. Let's say we're on at 8 o'clock, breakfast is at 7, usually something small, lighter. The first hour of our day is training, physical training. That could be anything from a 1 hour run, it could be a CrossFit lifting session, it could be a 2 or 3 hour hike with all of our gear on just to make sure that we're ready. Because when we're out there, your boots are 8 pounds, your pack is 30 pounds, you're carrying a tool. When we're on fires, usually I'll be the person with the chainsaw, so that's an additional 25 to 30 pounds of weight. And so a big part of this job is you need to make sure that you could get to a fire that's up on the hill as soon as possible. So prepping for things like that is big. After that, we'll do daily engine checks. We'll make sure that those are running, all of our facilities are functioning in case something could happen. I've actually become much more health conscious in this job because of the other people on the crew. Lots of fruits and vegetables, lots of good sources of protein out in Montana, really accessible, high quality beef out there. And so a lot of that, I like to do the fruits and vegetables, and then a lot of protein bars just wind up in my pack as well. We eat MREs in the field. MREs or freeze-dried foods, which are pretty calorically dense, but for myself, I'd like to have that higher protein in my diet. Sometimes an MRE will have Skittles or something like that in it, which is fun, but when you're burning like 4,000 calories a day, you kind of want real food instead of a Skittle. On days that we get a fire, it could happen at any time. So usually what will happen is the public will call it in, depending on where we are. We cover, I believe, around 2.8 million acres. And for the BLM in our area, there's only, I believe, 30 on-duty firefighters. And so when that call comes in, our job is just be ready, get to the engines as quick as possible. We've done all the prep that we need to do for ourselves, our packs, our gear, our vehicles, to get out there as quick as possible. The sooner you catch that fire, because they grow exponentially, 30 difference can be the difference between a 15-acre fire and a 5,000-acre fire. Once you get to the fire, as you're approaching it, there's an initial size up. You want to understand what's going on with the fire. Are there structures threatened? Is there a fire out where it's just cattle grazing, or is this maybe near some timber that's near some houses that's going to cause a lot more risk to the public? We want to know what we're going into. It's not like barbarian, just run at a fire. We want to know what tool for the job, and then we can call in additional resources as well. Once you get into that sort of the pace of getting the fire under control, if we're going direct, you're going to set a strong anchor point, just as where you know the fire's not going to be blowing back on you. And you'll start working 2 groups around either side of the fire's flanks. And you'll pretty much just be digging line. If it's accessible for an engine to get in there, you can spray water as well. If it's large enough, you might be calling in aerial resources. But I think the true heart and soul of wildland firefighting is you have 2 groups. They're digging lines around the fire, trying to get around, again, remove any consumable fuel between the fire and whatever's next.
This is so interesting to hear you talk through all of this. I'm wondering, from your experience, what has been like the craziest fire that you've come across, and how did you handle that internally, like within yourself? Because your job is so important, not just for the environment, but also for public safety. And how has that been?
It's definitely a different mode that you shift into. Like, you almost adopt a new personality when you're out there, because at least for me, I become very just objective focused. On a large scale fire, there could be a few thousand people working on it at any given time. And I think the biggest thing is that if you're given a job, you need to do that specific job to the best of your ability. There was a fire that we got on it, I think when it was around 25 acres, and then it did wind up going 3,000 acres. And that day I was running saw and just cutting that initial saw line around. So removing any large standing fuel, anything in the immediate, where the fire is already burned or is actively burning, we refer to that as the black. Anything that isn't burned is the green. So removing any fuel in the black that could spill out over the line. And so once you start going, in my mind, I really can't stop until that's done. You'll take a small break to drink water or snack on food if you can, but the goal is to stay in constant motion for that day, because fires really ebb and flow like we do, where they're very much awake and active during the day. Just because as that radiant heat hits it, it really makes a huge difference. The atmosphere gets drier, it's hotter. With those shifting temperatures, that's when winds tend to come through as well, so fueling that fire. And then at the nighttime, the fire will die down. Just as it cools off and relative humidity goes up, that fire will die down. Working at night comes with extra just inherent risk. We try to avoid adding more risk to that, so we usually wind up fighting fire during the day when it's hottest.
Is there a specific fire that you tackled that is really standing out in your memory because it went well? Like everything fell into place with how everyone was handling it. What is that standout story for you of the best case scenario, if there is one?
That's a good question. That's a funny question, because if you get on a fire fast and everybody does a really good job, it's a really kind of a boring story. Because you get there when it's small, you get around it quick, everybody was efficient and prepared, and then that's it, and then the fire's out, which is ideal. You know, you don't get like the huge blow up, whatever. We did have a fire that we got assigned to where we were just cleaning up one fire, and there was a lightning strike on the ridge next to it, and crews had been working it by the time that we had arrived. And it was this really sketchy ridgetop line, like this almost half-dome structure, where you could get up the back of it, and there was a steep drop-off, and the fire was burning down below that steep drop-off. It was a time of the year where a lot of aerial resources were sucked up in other large-scale fires. And then there wasn't a really great way. You would almost have to rappel down off the sheer cliffside to get to where the fire was, where we had been on a really just run and gun, get this fire done before we came to this one. And to watch, I was working with a different crew that isn't my own crew at the time, and to watch that leadership have the situation fully explained to them take that step back, reassess, and then we took a really indirect method of setting up a sprinkler system, damming a river, so we had a continuous water source that we were able to leave the local resources with really a turnkey sprinkler system that would keep this fire suppressed until it either self-consumed or they got enough rain on it. But that was kind of really cool to see that process of, like, you want to get right a fire opposite of water. If you can get water on it, it makes everything so much easier to take that time to create a really temporary removable dam that we could use natural resources in the area to create a large-scale sprinkler system when we didn't have other resources. I thought was really cool, and it spoke to like why I think the job is so interesting, because you can always find really innovative ways to make a job easier.
I'm curious, what are you all wearing when you're out in the field handling a fire?
Our standard PPE is going to be, we all wear a hard hat. We wear Nomex yellows, which is just a long sleeve t-shirt that won't burn. It is possible you get close enough to the fire that you can get radiant burns through it, but the material itself won't catch on fire. So we'll wear Nomex yellow shirt, Nomex green pants, and then all leather stitched boots for our feet. Anything with glue will melt. Other than that, gloves and glasses. And then we carry with us our line gear, which is going to have a few incendiary devices. That's where we have our food for the day, our water, and then a fire shelter, which is in a sort of worst case scenario deployment. It's pretty much a mylar or foil, you could think of it like a sleeping bag, which will reflect radiant energy from a fire in the case of a burnover situation or a time where somebody gets caught and the fire is going to pretty much, like we're in this grass field right now, if it were going to run over us and we couldn't get out in time, that's sort of our last resort.
There is a lot of risk involved in your work. How do you manage that potential risk to yourself and your own health?
I think the biggest thing that we talk about in the job is just risk mitigation. A lot of the times there's an easy way to do something and a hard way to do something, but the hard way is a little bit safer. It's all about just minimizing how many risky actions you take, which could be jumping down from a ledge versus taking the time to walk around and go down. A twisted ankle, sometimes if you're out there, is going to require a helicopter ride to get out. If not, taking a whole crew off to evac somebody, which then is going to take 3 hours of operation. So it's, one, it's really inefficient to get hurt out there. But then two, if you're hurt, you can't fight fire. And so we do a lot of just double, triple checking. There's a lot of accountability going on. Knowing who did engine checks that day is good to know in case things get missed. Not to assign blame, but to understand our own weaknesses. And okay, so then we obviously failed in teaching you how to do this well enough to be up to the standard. A lot of that mitigation comes from the chain of command, just running things up. And I think it works well in our field because of just that mindset of if you don't know something, you're not great at doing something, that means that we failed you on the leadership side. And it's good for us to know where you have those gaps in knowledge, because now we can learn how to be better teachers for the next people coming in.
And what is your favorite part of your job?
Definitely the people. I'd say the people, but the locations is great. Getting to go places you've never been before. And then it feels important when you're doing it. Like, it is great. It's a job, so you do it and you get paid. But the reason I got into this job was Minnesota was smoky without being on fire. And I think I read a Time for Kids article back in like second grade about permafrost, where it's like it's getting hotter, so permafrost is melting. And then I was like, oh my God, that means it's only going to get hotter because of the permafrost. And I was like, it's like a chain reaction. So I don't know if that Time for Kids article messed with me as a kid enough to be like, we got to do something about global warming. But that's always been one of those things that back my mind. So that summer in Minnesota, the fact that now I get to be like, okay, I'm doing something that I actually think matters is a really good feeling.
And for people who are interested in going into wildland firefighting, what would be your advice to them as they maybe prepare to apply or are entering their training? What would you say?
I'd say there's a lot of really great summer programs that you can do. The Nature Conservancy is a very good place. I started in the Conservation Corps, which I always recommend, especially for college kids, because they'll take you, you'll get your fireline certifications that you need to work. We call it getting a red card, which is just your S-130, S-190, your L-280, they're government NWCG classes. And other than that, just apply. There's a lot of stations that are understaffed. And so they'll hire you even without those certifications some of the time. I think being open, applying to wherever you think other people aren't applying first, just to get in the door, is always great. And then, yeah, I think just going for it. I think we always need people. And so if you want to get into it, the door is very, very wide open right now.
I think you're a good spokesperson for this career. And so what's on the horizon for you? What do the next few years look like for you?
I think a lot of the same. I've been doing a lot of work, so there's different types of crews. There's engine crews, hand crews, helitack, where you're going to be supporting the aerial resources as well. There's also fuels modules and things like that. I'm trying to get on something, it's called a hotshot crew, and so they're going to be a Type 1 status, just a little bit more qualifications, a little more capabilities. They tend to be assigned to the more active parts of larger scale fires. So talking with a few crews, visiting them is sort of my immediate, but in the long term, I like this job a lot. I think I want to stay doing it, and then, yeah, I don't know, I'm really happy with where I'm at, so it's boring, but just doing it more.
You're on a good trajectory.
Yes.
So it sounds like you're in a really good place. Harry, thank you so much for sharing about your job and what brings you joy. Anything you want to add?
No, not really. Just thanks for having me. It was so funny to run into you guys today. What a pleasure.
Yeah. Well, enjoy the rest of your trip, and I know that we'll see you either back here in Hawaii or somewhere in the Midwest when you're on your 6-month off season.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, enjoy your happy Aloha Friday, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Take care, everyone.